Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes for Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I'm your host. And on today's episode, I'm talking to Kurt Refsnider, who is an absolute legend in the sport and probably has more experience in the world of cycling as an athlete specifically than a lot of people in the bikepacking space and endurance bikepacking space specifically. If you don't know Kurt, he has his hand in a lot of different pots in the cycling industry, and I'm going to let him introduce himself on today's episode. But I will tell you some of the things that you can look forward to hearing about. One of my favorite stories was about the first century he ever did at 13 years old. Another big topic for today is the Continental Divide Trail, which is a 3,300 mile trail along the Continental Divide that starts in Canada and ends in Mexico or at the American-Mexico border. It parallels the Tour Divide route, and the biggest distinction here is that the CDT is primarily single track and that it's pretty much a hiking trail. In the past 8 years, only about 4 or a handful of people have even attempted or ridden the entire thing. So that is going to be a big topic on today's episode. We're also going to be talking about Bikepack Roots, Kurt's role there, and some of the functions of that organization, as well as some of Kurt's training, because yes, among other things, he's also a coach. So those are just some of the highlights that you have to look forward to on today's episode. But before we get to it, let's take a moment to thank the latest batch of patrons, starting with the one and only Andrew Dordal. Thank you so much, Andrew. You are our only new patron this week, and we appreciate you very much, and we appreciate everybody who supports this show. If you would like to help support this independent podcast, you can find out more over at patreon.com/bikesfordeath. Now, speaking of affiliate links, we do have something new to announce. We're making it easier for you to find all of the deals, all of the links, everything that we talk about in the podcast in one central location. The easiest way and the best way to keep up with our affiliate links and deals is on the Bikes for Death social media profile, as I just mentioned. So what we've done is we're going to be sharing any deals that we have on our stories, and then we're going to keep them saved in the highlighted section again on Instagram. You can find these also at bikesfordeath.com. There's an affiliate link at the very top underneath store, and you can also find those links there. So when you're thinking about doing any shopping this holiday season, please consider using our links. We get a kickback, and oftentimes you get a kickback too. And I hope that everybody you're buying for this holiday season is a cyclist. And if not, I think your New Year's resolution is becoming quite clear. Just kidding. All right. Well, that's it for today. The bills have been paid, and now it is time to get to my chat with Kurt Refsnider. And let me tell you what, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Kurt. I can't believe it's been 4 years since he's been on the podcast, but I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. All right, thank you for tuning in, and now let's get to my chat with Kurt Refsnider.
Good morning.
Good morning. Finally, we made it.
We did. It was bound to happen eventually.
Yeah, either that or you're going to get sick of me and tell me to go kick rocks.
No, I'm a geologist. I'd never say that.
Oh man, I set that one up and you teed it up very nicely. If this interview goes that well, this is going to be a great chat.
Oh, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I can't believe it's been 4 years since you've been on the podcast.
I saw that. I don't remember where I noticed when the last one was. That was a long time ago.
I know. Like, it blew my mind. I was like, holy shit. I didn't think it was. I kept scrolling. Like, I'm like, God, how long ago was he on the podcast? So It's been too long, man. I apologize. Been busy over here, but I bet you've been busy too.
I've been busy. There's so many awesome people in the community to talk to. No worries at all.
Yeah, that is a problem. It's a good problem to have, but like,
it's the best.
There's
kind of
just so many storylines, and it's different from 2015. I mean, I wasn't in the game in 2015, but you were. But you know, now there's like 100 storylines on any given day, whereas back then there might have been like oh, there's one thing happening, it's like there's one event or there's one guy or girl doing something cool. And now it's like all over the world, events and stories and athletes. And it's just, it's great from a content perspective, but like, I do wish that there was more of me. I wish that I had more time because things just, I mean, there's just conversations and stories that like I don't get to have because there is only one of me. But anyway, no worries.
You can only do what you can do.
Yeah, buddy. Well, I got a kiddo in the next room, but we're going to hope that this goes well. She might poke her head in every once in a while, but
it's all right.
Should be fine.
We'll roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's kick this thing off. Kurt Refsnider, welcome to the podcast, man. It's good to have you on, and it's been far too long, and I'm excited to have you back, man. It's going to be good to chat.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the invite. I'm stoked to be here.
I actually went back and listened to our last episode. It had been so long. I kind of knew the highlights of what we talked about, but I wanted a refresher. And I have to say, it was actually a pretty good episode. I really enjoyed it. Sometimes you go like I go back on my own podcast and I'm like, usually it's like mostly like self-critical stuff. It's like, I didn't do very good there and that kind of stuff. But I can recommend that one if people want to go back in the archives episode. 24. I recommend it. It's funny. I don't know what happened. I think my dyslexia kicked in because I legitimately have dyslexia. So this isn't hyperbole, but it's now I'm getting it twisted in my head again. I think it's listed as episode 24 on the podcast, but when I announce it as episode 25. So I don't know where I got off. Anyway, just ignore that one bit. And anyway, good to have you back on the podcast, man. I'm feeling chatty.
Let's try to have another interesting one.
Let's do it. I think we got some stuff to talk about. I'm going to start out this conversation the way I started out the last one. And I don't know if you remember, it was 4 years ago. The question is, you're at a cocktail party and it's black tie and you're standing at the bar waiting for your next drink, probably a martini, extra dry. And somebody asks you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
Oh my gosh. I feel so out of place at first because I've never been to a cocktail party. I have never, well, I guess I used to play in an orchestra that we wore pretty fancy clothing, but that's as close as I've come to wearing a tux.
Yeah. That's what I like about the imagery of this is picturing you in this environment. Yeah, this is good. Where's your long hair? Do you still have the long hair?
No, the mullet's, it's been gone for about a year now.
Oh, well, that kind of ruins. See, you can actually clean up now. I don't know if this imagery works as well.
Yeah, but it was a pretty healthy mullet for a while there. I don't know exactly. I still don't have a good answer for exactly what I do because I wear so many hats. But it's kind of all things bike, ride bikes, talk about bikes, write about bikes, advocate for bikes, work on bikes, a little bit of all that. So I think in short, like I'm a professional mountain biker on the Industry 9 Pivot Pro Backcountry team. I work for Bikepack Roots currently as the routes director there. I have a small coaching company working with endurance, mostly mountain bikers, but endurance cyclists of all sorts. And do a fair bit of freelance writing these days, just kind of sharing stories about adventures and places that I find important and things like that.
Yeah. Well, good. That's a good summary. And it's changed a little bit since the last time you were on, because last time you were the director, I think was your title of Bikepacking Roots. And, so things have just changed a little bit, and you had just finished. I think you were just completed being a professor of geology at Prescott, Arizona, or Prescott.
Prescott College.
College, yeah.
Yep.
So some life changes for you over the last 4 years. How are things going? I mean, you're like full-time bikes now. Are things going well? This is a medium where we're all trying to figure out how to make a living in it, and like, how can I just do bikes all the time? And as I talk to a lot of people, it takes your hand in a lot of different pots to kind of make this work as a quote unquote job. And you're one of the people that looks like they're kind of figuring it out. How's it going?
Oh, it's fantastic and it's exhausting. I think that's the reality of, I mean, so much of the time with any kind of job where you're kind of building things in large part on your own, it's a ongoing passion project and just takes so much time and energy investment. And I've been at this for years and years now. And so it feels great to be able to kind of have everything coalescing around bikes at this point. I was a little worried how, like, if I would start to get tired of them, or, when everything's built around something that you love so much. But I think I've been able to find a pretty good balance with that. And with so much of what I do on the bike, it's kind of amazing that all of our team sponsors are just incredibly supportive of however I choose to spend my time. And there's no one out there saying like, oh, you need to go do this race and we want you to do more of that and spend a little bit more time on this, or can you come do that? It's very self-directed and lets me just kind of pursue the things that I find the most inspiring in terms of riding and racing. And I think this year, especially more than any other, was highlighted by that, being able to finally have the time to take on a few really big challenges that I've wanted to for a long time, and things just didn't quite line up. And so that was what I think a total of, between riding the Iditarod Trail in the spring, late winter spring, that was a month, and then 3 months on the Continental Divide Trail. That's 4 months of my year that was just riding, and on some really tough trails. So
yeah,
those are both ones that have been big goals for a long time, and I'm so grateful that I was actually able to make them happen this year. And now I'm kind of paying the price with having to catch up on so much with life and work stuff and planning for next year and everything, all just kind of piling down on me almost immediately after I finished the CDT. So that's just the reality of what it is. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know, some people call it hustling that goes along with it, just like needing to figure out how to make ends meet and not knowing exactly, like this year things are great. What are things going to look like next year, with the ups and downs of the bike industry and the economics around that impacts so much of what I do. And that's something else to navigate. And unfortunately, we're at kind of a major low in things following a very high pandemic high in bike sales and what the bike industry was doing. So kind of at the mercy of all of that, and have to figure out how to work with it. So
yeah, that's a super important point that is worth vocalizing, because I don't know how much, it's pretty obvious if you think about it, but like all of us in the industry, in the cycling industry, and I'll include myself at this point, we're all at the mercy of the cycle industry at large, and it's been a wild ride. Like, I've been in this game for the last 5 years, and it's just been a wild ride with COVID and how that impacted everything, and how we're still seeing the effects on the opposite, the pendulum swinging to the other side of the equation, or the equilibrium, whatever the pendulums do, they move, and it's on the other side now. You know what they do. But yeah, man, it's like, what was the first thing you said? It's like exciting and exhausting, or something along those lines. It's like that was what you said at the very beginning. I was like, yeah, that's it. It's like, I'm super hyped up for this. I love it. It's pure passion. But also it's like, it's extremely scary to just be at the whim of this market that you really have no control over, right? You're just like, I mean, if companies don't have money, they don't have money, it's not there, and they got to figure out ways to cut, and that's always the game. And so it never. Do you think that you see a path forward? And if this is too personal, I apologize, but I'm just curious in general, like, do you see, because you've been in quote unquote the game for a long time in one way or another, mostly as an athlete, but do you see yourself creating like a really solid job for yourself in this space, or is this the game that we're playing?
Oh, it's really hard. And I think if as an athlete, especially but I mean, it goes with nonprofits, or I mean with any business really. If you're reliant on just a single source of revenue, or a single kind of place within the world that money comes from, you're going to end up in trouble in one way or another at some point. And so if, as a, say, professional cyclist, you're 100% reliant on money just from cycling companies that support you, as soon as the cycling industry hits a downturn, you're going to be probably one of the first people negatively impacted by that. Or if you're a nonprofit and 100% reliant on corporate giving, same thing. Or I should say corporate giving from the cycling world or from the outdoor industry. And so I think that's where it becomes really important to have ways to make sure that you're not 100% reliant on any one particular source. And that doesn't matter if you're a professional athlete or a business or what. So I think for me, having my hands in a bunch of different pots, that makes things much more comfortable, because, so much with athletes, unfortunately, are like 1-year contracts, and you're good through the end of the year, and then you don't know if that company will be able to support you next year or if it's going to be at the same level. And that's stressful. And it's that season right now with all those conversations. And, we're getting a better feel for where things are and where we're going to be, what we're going to be able to do next year with that. But if I didn't have anything else to fall back on, or, with coaching, I can take on a few extra athletes, since there's always folks that are looking for help. That's fantastic for me selfishly, because I can be just like, oh, I need to bring a little bit more support in for next year. I can do some more coaching, or more work for Bikepacking Roots or things like that. So I think that's really important to have those sorts of options. And the reality is, especially if you're a professional racer, like you can only do that for so many years and have that the main thing that you do. And I think that's for the team that Kate Boyle and I started a few years ago. That's one of the things that we both really appreciate about the team and the structure, and that we have the support we do from sponsors, that only part of what we do is racing, and parts adventure, and parts like advocacy and trail related work and storytelling that we do. And so being able to balance all of those things and be known not just as racers and being supported not just as racers, that also really helps, because we're not siloed in just one thing and doing one thing that, the reality is your days are kind of numbered. And especially if you're known as like an ultra racer, then you can only keep that up for so long before your body or mind start to give in to the demands of it. So I think the more diverse things can be in so many ways, the better in the long term.
Yeah. It's one thing I really walked away with from our last conversation, was really being impressed by how active you are and how many different projects you're in, or just roles you're in. And I've learned, it's been 4 years. Like I've learned that's just the way it is, man. And it's worth noting, like, I think it helps to create perspective whenever we see people who are really prominent or visible in the community. A lot of times it's not they just got lucky or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's really that they're working their butts off in the background, and they're doing writing over here, and they're doing coaching over here, and they're racing over here, and they're starting a nonprofit here, and it's like it's a lot of work. And the end result is like, you're going to see my name pop up a couple times. Of course, it helps if you win a bunch of races like you have. So that helps too. But it's not a turnkey type thing where you're like an accountant and you get your master's or MA or BA or MBA. MBA, that's what it's called, I think. Yeah. And you go into accounting and you get a 6-figure job. Like this is it's a hustle, like you said. So
it definitely is. And it's, I think, what was it, 2008, 2009, when I got into the bikepacking race world and started winning races and setting records. And it took, that was ahead of when the industry was paying any attention to bikepacking or even knew what it was. But it was probably a decade that was just, I was doing other things. I was a grad student, I was teaching, but letting that side of my passion grow gradually and steadily, and building relationships in the cycling industry, and being able to slowly ask folks for a little bit more and a little bit more for help. And that eventually turned into something. But that was a decade-long process. And if I just focused on that, it could have been much faster. But it's not going to happen overnight or in 2 years. Like it takes a lot of patience and dedication to make that happen, and some luck and some being in the right place at the right time. Like there's all that factors in.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell is a good book where he talks about what causes companies or organizations to tip. So he uses like Apple as an example. And like a lot of that was Steve Jobs being in the right place at the right time. There was a university in his hometown that was the first university in America to get computers. And then they opened up the computer lab to high school students. And so he was in the only high school in the world or in the United States
wow.
where you get access to computers. And then, but like, all those things had to coalesce for Steve Jobs to be Steve Jobs and for Apple to be Apple. And if all those things didn't happen, then you don't get the tipping point. And he makes a point through that book that like we're all to some degree a victim or it's
like a product of.
Yeah, the product of circumstance. That's exactly what I was trying to say. The product of circumstance, the time, right place is a lot of it. And then you got to have the right time, right place. And then you have to have the vision and the work ethic and everything else to take advantage of all these timings and the things. And it really is the combination of those two things that oftentimes create success, whether it's in an individual or a company or whatever, So,
yeah. Oh, that's a nice way to summarize it.
I think you did it good, and I just re-summarized what you said.
But you did in way fewer words.
Okay. All right. I win that round. Next question. We'll see. I think you'll win this one. So one of the things that I don't think I did well enough on our last episode is kind of go back and get your backstory. And we don't have to spend too long on it, but one of the things that I read when I was researching this episode was that you did your first century when you were 13 years old. So I feel like that's maybe that could be a good story or a good entryway into how long you've been doing this, how long you've been competitive. Most 13-year-olds don't even have the thought to go ride 100 miles on a bike. So can you take us back to 13-year-old Kurt? I'd love to hear the story of your first century.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that now with the expansion of NICA, the National Interscholastic Cycling Association, high school racing, mountain bike racing, and so many cycling teams, it's like you see kids that are, maybe not quite 13, but like 14, 15, doing huge things and racing 50-mile mountain bike races and racing 24s solo and things like that, which is awesome to see. And back when I was 13, I was in Minnesota, grew up in the Twin Cities, and there was no like junior cycling community at all, like no support for it. A couple years later, when I started going to mountain bike races and racing in the junior category, there'd be, like 2 of us in beginner and maybe 3 in sport and 1 in expert, and that's it. It's just it wasn't really a thing that was growing in any appreciable way. But for some reason, like I always loved bikes when I was a kid, just riding around the neighborhood and riding in the woods by my house. And when I was apparently 13, I was in the library, the county library with my mom, and younger folks probably won't remember this, but in the era where print magazines were shared widely at libraries, they had these kind of tilted shelves that each one would be laid out so you could see the cover of it. And this would be like an entire wall of the libraries, just magazines spread out, all the current issues. And I was looking just through the B section or the bike. I don't remember how they categorized them, if it was alphabetical or by like topic or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it was by category there, because I think it was a bunch of bike magazines, and bicycling has been around forever. And I was looking at the cover of one of those, and just in there, like, they always have these kitschy headlines to try to catch your attention, like top 5 ways to do this, or you too can ride a century. And I remember seeing that and be like, how do you ride 100 years? And I didn't know anything about biking other than that I liked riding bikes. And so I pulled it off and like opened up, found the little article, and it was just like a 2-page spread on riding a century. And it was like, oh, it's 100 miles. And I didn't know that was a thing. Like, people strive to ride 100 miles in a day. And it really was just a little thing to encourage you to try. And it had these little training progressions, which were these very simple small tables. And they were, I think, 8 weeks or 12 weeks or something like that, with if you want to like survive, if you want to thrive, if you want to set a PR or something like that, follow this plan for this many hours, and like ride hard this day, ride easy that day, kind of thing. And so I took it over to the photocopier and got some coins from my mom, copied those 2 pages, and went home. And I remember like cutting out the little plan and putting it on my bulletin board. And then for some reason I decided I wanted to do it. And I didn't have a road bike, but my dad took me to, where was it? I guess it was just a little shop that sold bikes on consignment. And we found a Panasonic Team road bike that was $100. And he helped me overhaul it because it was in kind of rough shape. And then I just started following this training plan. And I think my parents watched and were like, huh, he's kind of dedicated to this. And eventually when it came time to do the actual 100-mile ride, my dad had gone out and scouted some country roads like northwest of the Twin Cities and found this, I think it was a 20-mile loop, and just kind of like rolling through farmlands on quiet roads. And he drove me out there, and he just sat in a church parking lot all day while I rode laps around that. And he made me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I forget what, I think it took me like seven hours, something like that.
No
which,
way.
Looking back, not bad for riding solo.
Fast.
Being all alone out there.
Your first one, I'd say that's a good time. I think my first one was 8.5 hours. Yeah, so that's kind of I guess where my fascination with endurance stuff began, and then pretty quickly after that, I got a mountain bike and didn't ride the road bike much at all, and gone back and forth over the years. I was a very dedicated road racer for a few years, and when I was in grad school, did a lot of traveling and racing on the road, but no more. One more personal question. How old are you?
As of yesterday, 42.
Hey, happy birthday.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm 43. I thought I had a feeling we were close in age.
Yep.
Yeah. Quite close. Happy birthday. That's good timing, at least for me to be able to wish you a happy birthday.
Yeah.
What's amazing is, so that took place like 30 years ago, 29 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And your memory of that is so good. That's amazing that you remember all of that, all those details. Like, you remember the way the magazines were. You remember you copied 2 pages. You got quarters from your mom. Like, the whole thing.
That's how those impactful experiences are. Is like you think
They're
about
sticky.
them, and the more you think about something like that, the more clearly you remember it. I don't know if it probably evolves a little bit through time, since you never remember it quite exactly the same way as it happened or the prior time you remembered it. But yeah,
it's a version of the memory.
Yep,
it's close enough. And no one can prove you wrong except for your mom, and I don't know if she's around. So
she is, and she has an absolutely amazing memory. So don't tell her. she'll probably correct it.
She'll be like, it was 3 pages, Kurt. Come on. That is a fascinating story. I feel like we could learn a lot about you just from that one story. Like, how many 13-year-old kids pick up a magazine, see you riding 100 miles, and then follow the training plan and do it? And not only do it, but like, you did this by yourself. This was a self-motivated thing. There wasn't a team. There wasn't a prize. There was a magazine on a rack. You're like, oh, that looks fun. You stuck it on your wall. You made a training plan, and then you did it. And you got a little support, though. But
I did.
We'll let that pass.
My parents were like, they never pushed me toward anything in the athletic realm. Like, I was a Nordic skier in high school, and they never, like, there was no nothing other than just standing back and watching me and cheering me on and doing what I like. If I needed something, being there to help with it. That was definitely their approach. And I think at the time I wished for maybe a little bit more, seeing, my friends being like pushed toward, oh, you should go do this training camp. You should work with that coach. And I think in retrospect, it was really good because all those folks didn't burn out, or all those folks did burn out. And I just kept on doing my thing for 30 years now and haven't burned out of any of that. And so I think they had a really healthy stance and all of that. And I really appreciate the way they were supportive, but just kind of letting me choose the direction 100%.
A big part of, I don't know how big of a part, but it's certainly a factor in being successful at solo supported ultra endurance of any endeavor, but let's say bikepacking and cycling. You have to be somewhat comfortable and keep your own company pretty well. Mm-hmm. Hold on one second. Sloan. Okay, I'll get it after my podcast, okay? Hold on, please.
No worries.
Yes. Oh, Sloan made you a birthday card. Happy birthday from Sloan.
Oh, thank you, Sloan. Sloan's listening in.
That's very sweet, Sloan.
That's really sweet.
I knew we were going to get an interruption. That was a pretty good one.
That's a great one.
Uh, what was I saying?
You're talking about being kind of self motivated, good at keeping your company
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
yourself, and
Yeah. And so the fact that you did this at 13 by yourself, does that speak to just a personality trait of yours? Like you're self-motivated, you keep your own company well. I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm wondering what that is. If that tells us a little bit about Kurt.
I think so. I think there's a motivation there to just see what I'm capable of, and that's apparently always been there, and motivation to just try different things, which has always been there. Sometimes stronger than other times, stronger of an urge than other times. And I think the self-directed element of it is so important. That's been so helpful with my success in everything in so many years. I mean, I think going to grad school and working through that whole process for God, eight years, I think it took for master's and PhD. That requires so much dedication and self-direction and self-motivation. And so I think all of that, the racing and riding I did as a kid and as a teenager really helped develop that, but it was already there. And I think that's one of the ways that our sport does cross over into real life, is that if you can figure out how to focus on what's going to make you successful when no one else is looking and no one else is there to support you, and it's something that you really want to make happen, if you can do that for yourself in private, like it's going to be so much easier to do that for others or for where you work or things like that, when folks are looking. But so I think some things have changed dramatically since I was 13, and some things haven't actually changed that much, which is interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's through sports and I think really through endurance efforts that we learn about ourselves, and by learning about ourselves, we teach ourselves about ourselves, right? And like, those are tools. Those are absolutely tools that you can put in your life arsenal for dealing with a variety of circumstances. And I really do think I think you said it quite well. And I mean, I feel like a broken record, but man, this sport specifically really teaches you how to be resourceful. It teaches you that you can rely on yourself, right? Like that's an important thing, is like knowing that you can trust yourself to do hard things and you can rely on yourself and you be successful. Like learning that about yourself is a really good thing to know. And then once you know that, you can take on anything, I feel like. I mean, what, I don't know. I'm one of these people, man. I think anything is possible, really. Like if you put your time and your attention to something, like, there's tipping points and there's luck and there's all these other factors. But man, I'm a big believer in kind of putting your time and attention and your focus on where you want to go. There's an analogy. I always use analogies, and I hate that I do it, but I can't help it. I'm a simple-minded person, but like my first tattoo was an arrow right here. And the whole like symbolism behind that is like with archery, you spend your whole time on your form, your posture, your breathing, your aiming, all these things have to be right. And then once you have your target, you release the arrow. And so I'm just a big believer in like pointing that arrow where you want it to go, but it takes all these other things to get that arrow where you want it to go. But I think if you do all the other things, I think, I'm a believer in people, and I'm going a little bit off on a tangent, but to bring it back around, I think it starts with being able to believe in yourself. Sorry,
Totally.
you good?
Yeah, I was just going to add the self-confidence side of it, is that you need some of that. Like to take on hard things and challenging things and intimidating things, you need some self-confidence. And, it doesn't hurt at all to have people cheering you on from the sidelines, so to speak. But the more you're able to accomplish when it comes to those hard things, the bigger your self-confidence gets and the easier it makes it to take on more of those in the future. So there's this very positive feedback, this snowball effect when it comes to that. And that's another thing that affects the way you approach anything in life and your outlook on so many things too. So
This could be an interesting segue. Let's continue this thought experiment. Let's skip the next 29, 30 years. So, you went on your 13 or you're at 13, you went on a 100-mile ride. And then, now at 42, you just finished the Continental Divide Trail, 3,300 miles. Let's start here. What was your belief in yourself going into the CDT? At this stage in your life, having amassed all of those experiences in life, I mean, where are you at right now where you can tackle something this big,
Yeah, so the CDT, for folks that don't know about the trail, there's the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail as the three kind of marquee cross the country hiking trails. And they're all three are congressionally designated national scenic trails. The PCT and the Appalachian Trail are completely closed to bikes, 100%. And the CDT is about, I think, like 65% of it has bikes actually allowed on it. And so it's the only of those three trails that's mostly open to bikes or open to bikes at all. And it's really hard. It's a hiking trail. Like, most of it does not have trail that's designed with bikes in mind. There's long sections of that the trail was never built. It was just sort of hiked in over the years. And it is, well, for comparison, it uses a bunch of the Colorado Trail passing through Colorado, and those miles feel so remarkably, I don't want to say easy, but easier than most of the CDT as a whole, because they're so trafficked. They're well constructed, even though they're physically really demanding and technically pretty dang hard. When I got there, I was very glad to be on that trail and get to kind of be able to relax a little bit. So that for folks that know the Colorado Trail, that says a lot about the CDT as a whole.
Yeah. We'll go back and we'll fill in some of the history on the CDT to fill in some context.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So so I first encountered the CDT when I was living in Boulder in grad school and was up training. I think I was training for the Grand Loop, if I remember right. So this would be back in 2008. No, it was 2009. It was when I was training for the Tour Divide, my first time on that. And I saw on a map some single track up in this area way up high above town. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that actually exists on the ground. And so I went up on a long training ride to find it. And there was this little post with the CDT emblem and said, like, Continental Divide Trail. I was like, what is the Continental Divide Trail? And, at this point, I was training to race the Great Divide mountain bike route, which is all dirt roads pretty much. And I went home, plugged Continental Divide Trail into search engine and discovered there's a single track route across the country that parallels or kind of crisscrosses the Great Divide mountain bike route the whole way down. I was like, yeah, what? I love single track. I love single track more than anything else when it comes to riding. And there I was getting ready to race dirt roads across the country. And in my head, I was like, man, I wish we were racing the single track route across the country, not knowing anything about how hard it is or that long sections are closed to bikes or anything like that. And pretty quickly I forgot about it and focused on racing the Divide. But that was always in the back of my mind, that experience, just seeing the trail, and I started encountering it in more places in the West. And it was maybe 3 or 4 years. No, it's probably just a couple years later. I ordered the CD set that this guy had. He sent him $3 and he sends you these really nice detailed topo maps that had the CDT and all the different alternates that he had found or people had hiked along it. Because at that point it was a kind of an unofficial thing. Like, there was no technically official route that everyone agreed, like, this is the CDT. It's like, well, probably this trail, and you can link through on this if you want, or this one goes over a summit or something like that. And so I got the CD set, map set, looked at that a bunch, and was distracted by other race pursuits. And so never really dug in too deeply on that. And then just that kind of pattern continued, that I'd see it in another place and then I'd see it somewhere else. I'm like, oh, this looks super cool. And then in 2014, and we can come back to this, but Scott Morris and Esther Harini went out and were the first people to ride the full length of a bike legal version of the CDT. And paying attention to that, like, they blogged about it, had awesome photos to kind of take people along while they were out there. And at that point, it's like, oh man, this looks so awesome and so much harder than I ever expected it would be. And then, so that was 2014. I think that was when the seed was really firmly planted in my head, like, okay, I'm going to ride this. But it literally took almost a decade from then, I think, to build up the courage and self-confidence to want to actually take it on, knowing that I was going to be able to have fun doing it and not just be struggling the whole way.
Yeah. That's really interesting. On our last episode, our last conversation, after doing the Triple Crown, you made a comment along the lines of, I'm done with this type of racing for a while and maybe forever. Like you were kind of, you said something along the lines of like, you were tired of putting your body through that, you know, I mean,
yeah,
you've been doing this a while, endurance sports. I mean, it's a huge physical endeavor and it takes a lot out of you. So it's interesting that now you're like talking about, you know, at the same time, you're like, because you were doing the Triple Crown and a bunch of other races, and it's like you're trying to build up the courage to go and do it and to be able to do it and have fun. So
yeah,
maybe we can pick up on that thought process. Like, how did you build up the courage, and how did you get back to a place where you were ready to take on another big ride like this, you know?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a tough one. Because I don't know exactly where the tipping point, so to speak, you keep bringing up that term. I don't know quite where it was, because you need to obviously be able to have the time, like 3 months of time to go do something like this. And if that time is not readily available in your calendar, it's easy to just be like, no, I'm not ready yet. Or, you know, to kind of come up with excuses for why the time isn't right to take on a big challenge like that. And this year, well, last year, looking forward to this year, that it was the first time where I felt like I actually had, you know, a big chunk of time, three plus months, that I could take on something like this. And so I think that helped to just suddenly have that opportunity there, that space on the calendar. But I think the other thing was that just some of these other trails that I've spent a lot of time on the last few years and done, I mean, during the pandemic, was chase the quote unquote FKT on the Wyoming Range Trail, which I think I was the first person to through ride that trail. It's only 80 miles, but it's, well, still the hardest single trail I think I've ever ridden. And I don't know exactly why, but I included that in my CDT ride this summer, and it was still the hardest trail I've ever ridden, sandwiched by a whole bunch of other hard stuff.
Wow.
But, you know, doing things like that and mostly enjoying them, despite how ridiculously demanding and challenging the trails are and how much hiking there is along the way. And I throw around the kind of notion of normalizing difficult a lot, especially with athletes I coach. And in recent years, I've just spent so much more time on really hard trails in the backcountry and doing things where moving 4 miles an hour all day is the norm. And that made it so much easier to think about doing something like the CDT, where like there's more of that on that trail than any other trail I've ridden, obviously. But if I can go out and have fun doing that for a full day or 3 days, you know, that's so much better than getting out there for a day and being like overwhelmed by it and not finding any enjoyment in it. So I think that realization, like, I really do enjoy those sorts of trails, even if the riding necessarily isn't all that great for half the day or 3/4 of the day at times. Wanting and being willing to work through those really hard sections to get to the parts that are absolutely amazing, and that there's no other way to experience than dealing with that. I think once I kind of realized that shift in my perspective, that made it so much easier to think about, well, 3,000 miles of really hard stuff, I think I could probably do that.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
So let's fill in some more of the history of this route. After Scott and Esther did it in, I think you said 2014. You know, why? I'm curious, like why nobody else has attempted it.
Oh man.
Is the route developed? Why? I mean, it's like it's so obvious. It's a border to border. It parallels the Tour Divide. It's single track option versus a dirt.
Hmm.
A double track mostly option. It sounds hard, but also there's a lot of people in this space that like to do hard things. So like
Yeah.
what's preventing people? Why are you the second person to do this in a matter of 10 years, like what's going
Oh,
on there?
so yeah. So when Scott Nestor wrote it, and so that was 2014, the bikepacking community was a lot smaller than it is today. It was much more, I think, mountain bike focused at that time. Like there wasn't the huge explosion in gravel. If you look at the bikepacking races that were around at that point, it was a lot of single track races, and not too many gravel type ultras and bikepacking races at that point. And so at the time, Scott Nestor finished it, and I think a lot of us in the community were like, "Wow, this is going to be the next big bikepacking adventure route. Like this is going to draw a lot of attention, a lot of people." And 2 years later, Aaron Weinsheimer from Salida wrote it. He was the, I guess, third person. And then that was 2016, and then no one since. So it clearly did not become the next big thing,
No.
like we thought. And what was really, really impressive about Scott Nestor's ride on it was that, no one had tried to ride the whole thing. People ride sections of it. Like there's certain sections that are super popular with mountain bikes on day rides. A big chunk of the Colorado Trail is also part of the CDT, so that part's known and familiar. But there's so much that is very unknown to mountain bikers, and so many sections that either were closed to bikes, like wilderness areas, wilderness study areas, recommended wilderness areas, and then some odd sections that don't have any special designation but are just not open to bikes. And it's really challenging, even today, to figure out where those sections are, what the current bike access is. Some of them, what you see on maps is different from what you see signed on the ground. Some of them, if you call the BLM, for example, in New Mexico and ask them about it, they're like, "Oh yeah, bikes are fine there." And then you go out there and every single road crossing is very clearly signed no bikes. So there's a lot of confusion around where bikes are allowed, where they're not. And then getting around some of those sections is easy. Getting around some of those is really challenging to figure out what the best way to do is to not end up on just like busy highways or something like that. And so Scott Nestor had that to contend with, and they had so much trail that they just had no idea. Is this going to be like 2 days to cover 60 miles? Or is that going to take 3 days or a day? And then some sections are, 200 plus miles between resupply options. And that's 200 miles of like mostly single track. And if you don't know if it's going to be 35 miles a day or 60 miles a day, that means it's really hard to plan.
Yeah.
So there was so much uncertainty for them riding the route. And even back then, like navigational resources were not fantastic. Like now there's an app for the trail that the coalition, the organization behind the trail, has put together with far out guides. So I know some people have used that in the bikepacking community for the Great Divide mountain bike route, for the Western Wildlands route. Great Divide has a different app. But that makes it so much easier to see, like, oh, there's water here. There's somebody left a comment 2 days ago that said this creek is still flowing. Whereas 10 years ago, Scott and Esther were using PDF topo maps and trying to figure out which way was the best way to go, and had no idea where there was going to be water. So much. I mean, it was a whole different world of adventure for the first folks trying to bike that years ago. And so that, it was incredible to see them pull that off, and incredibly inspiring too.
Yeah, that's one of my thoughts while I was preparing for this interview is one, how challenging putting together a route like this and how daunting it would be, because I mean, when you're the first, there's a 60-mile section of single track. You don't know if it's going to take you 1 day or 2 days, or I mean, there's just so many unknowns. Mm-hmm. So my thought for you, or my question for you is, how much resources are available now? Obviously, probably a little bit more, but still a lot of probably unknowns, I would assume. Like how much of the route you rode is the same route they rode? did you
Yeah,
develop your own route?
yeah, and things have changed in the last decade. Like the Continental Divide Coalition and the Forest Service have been steadily working on building new sections of CDT to get it off, off motorized routes, off dirt roads, things like that. So there's lots of new sections of trail. There's sections that it's always uncertain how much deadfall there's going to be across the trail. And I mean, I probably carried my bike over 3,000 trees, like a huge amount. And it could have been so much worse, just given how much of the trail goes through areas that have experienced a tremendous amount of beetle kill. And so there's just standing dead trees everywhere. One storm can blow down hundreds. And so there's uncertainty in that, because that can make a 50-mile section turn from a day and a half to 3 days very easily. But there's so much more for information now about the trail because it's getting more popular. Like last year, I think there were 400 people or so that hiked the whole thing. So it's not super popular at all, but there's at least a fair bit of use out there now. So there's the app, and that tells you, like, quote unquote, what the official route is, and has information on water sources, and users can submit comments to just share what the status of anything, like any place there's a waypoint on the app, you can leave a comment on it. So that's a really good resource that is, especially for water planning, is incredible. Trail Forks, the mountain bike trail app, wasn't around when Scott Nestor wrote it years ago. Most of the CDT is on there. It turns out that most of the information about what the trail is like is completely off on it. Like, whoever has entered most of that has either put very little time into it, or there's a lot of false information on there. Like, this section's open to bikes. No, it's actually closed to bikes. Or this section's closed to bikes. No, it's actually open to bikes. Like,
it might be someone that hates cyclists and is just putting misinformation to get us in trouble.
That crossed my mind. So there's a few stretches that there's good information from local folks that have clearly taken the time to put it in there. So that's there, but it's not a very valuable resource. Scott has been amazing over the years of sharing his route with folks that are interested in potentially riding it. And so the whole backbone of the route that I followed was based on his GPS track from their ride in 2014, and then modified to try to incorporate all the new sections of trail that have been built. And then I think the biggest difference was with some of the large wilderness area bypasses that were needed. Scott Nestor just pretty much by default hopped onto the Great Divide mountain bike route to get around most of those, which is really convenient that it's usually somewhere nearby that you can just get on that and hammer out some dirt road miles that are usually fairly quiet roads and get around the wilderness areas that are closed to bikes. And for some reason, I thought that, well, let's incorporate as much single track as possible. And, some people are like, single track or nothing. Like, there's that devoted to it. And that was not my approach. I just was like, I don't really feel like spending the next 200 miles going around the Bob Marshall Wilderness on dirt roads. Like, there's got to be trail. And so for some of those long ones, I put together what on paper looked like phenomenal detours. And holy cow, like the first one, you have to go around Glacier Park because that's closed to bikes. And then I got like 10 miles of CDT. And then the CDT goes into the Bob Marshall Wilderness, which is one of the biggest wilderness areas in the lower 48. And I had been eyeing this sequence of trails that you can link up along the Rocky Mountain front in basically it's right where the mountains hit the Great Plains in northern Montana. And it's absolutely gorgeous country, like rolling topography on the plains, like really beautiful grasslands. And then these kind of series of limestone cliffs, like stair step cliffs that just climb up away from the plains. And it looks kind of like a huge wave, like white waves crashing onto the plains from a distance. Like, it's stunning. And so I'd looked at these and drawn up a route through these a few years ago for another trip. That one didn't come together. Tried again the next year, got shut down by snow, so that didn't happen. So I was like, oh, I'll just follow that route I put together. And some of it seemed like no one uses those trails other than grizzly bears, which there's like bear tracks on bear tracks on bear tracks, and elk. Oh, and then probably a handful of hunters in the fall. Like, no maintenance, no use, hard to follow the trails. And this was starting on day 2 of my trip. And that day was like climbing over, God, probably 300 down trees on this section of trail in the Badger 2 Medicine. I ran into a trail crew out there of three Forest Service folks that had cleared like the first mile of the trail, and that was all they had time for on their hitch, and were headed back out. And were just like wide-eyed seeing somebody on a bike there. And like, where are you going? It's like, oh,
Mexico.
over this pass and then Mexico. And you're like, there's like 8 miles of deadfall ahead. I was like, well, yeah, I'll get through it. And oh my gosh,
man.
it was like that took the rest of, I saw them at like probably 11 a.m. and it took literally the rest of the day to get through that 8 miles. The mosquitoes were horrendous. And I was just, at that point, I had probably, I don't know, probably just 2 days of food on my bike. So it wasn't too heavy, but I got to the end of that and up to this pass and was just absolutely worked. And it was a stunning place to camp. Like the mosquitoes weren't too bad, huge views of these limestone peaks and a very clear trail with minimal deadfall. I could see like going down the valley. So I knew I'd have good riding in the morning, but I was sitting there at camp just like, what am I thinking? Like this, I should have researched these trails a little bit more. And then like 2 days later, ended up on a section that on paper there was a trail there on the maps, nice little dotted line. And I've gotten kind of a reputation for following dotted lines and just going with them. And this one dotted line continued, and then it went on a private property, and the trail I was supposed to follow went up a cliff, like a legitimate cliff. Cool. And it's one of these limestone palisades. And
little mountaineering thrown in.
Oh my! And I knew there was trail on the other side. I had a friend that had ridden down, and he's like, "It's a phenomenal descent," but he had just done an out and back. So I knew, like, literally, I think it was 1.5 miles from where I was. There was good trail, but there's a cliff in between, and the options were either backtrack 10 miles to get back to a dirt road, and then take that like all the way out on the plains around this section, and then come back into the next canyon south, or I could go up the cliff. And so I took my bike apart. I think I took 3 trips up. Take my bike up in pieces, and it wasn't like a vertical cliff. It was like very scrambly, like you need your hands to get up it, pretty loose. And got up to the top and was again like absolutely worked by the end of it. But the trail was at the top. I camped right at the trail, and then in the morning had a phenomenal descent down, and then some easier dirt road miles to get around some another little bit of wilderness that blocked the north-south through access there. But it was, I think, that detour around the Bob Marshall took 5 days, I think, for a couple 100 miles. And wow. I could have taken dirt road on the other side of the wilderness and been through it in like a day and a half. But I was like, I want to take trail. And I remember just very distinctly right at dusk on that, I guess it was the 6th day on the trail, getting back to the official CDT. And I'd climbed up, I had to carry my bike on my back up through this burn area, up the last like mile, up this, what was mostly really good riding up a valley on some pretty backcountry trail, and got to the intersection with the CDT. And there's like the little tiny faint trail that I came up on. And then this ribbon of like smooth dirt, single track with a bunch of hiker footprints on it. And that was the CDT. And you could just see it like weaving off on the ridgeline to the south. And I was so relieved to just be back on like good trail, which was hilarious. Like it was a great, I think in retrospect, it was a decent way to set the tone for the trip. Start off with some really hard miles, and then the actual hard CDT isn't going to seem quite as hard, which is good. But I was worked by the end of that first week. I was so exhausted, just physically, my whole body, my arms from pushing, my back from like literally carrying my bike on my back up steep stuff. Yeah. And
so let's talk about part of what your motivation is for this route, because I'm going to follow up with like it's got to impact part of your decision making here. Like, why are you climbing the cliff instead of doing the dirt and stuff? So like, I think we might have mentioned it earlier in this episode. If not, I think your role at Bikepacking Roots is route developer, something like that. And that's a big part of what Bikepacking Roots is doing, is developing routes. That's one way we can promote bikepacking and help with access and stuff. And that's a big part of what you do. I assume that there's you're trying to maybe develop this for Bikepacking Roots as well. So like, what's your goal and thought process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think so much, it's so ingrained in me now, like so much of the riding I do, I'm always thinking of what would this be like for other folks? Like, is this something that would be a route that's enjoyable for the masses, or for a subset of the masses, or no one at all besides me kind of thing. And getting back to one of your questions from a bit ago, like why don't more people ride the CDT? Why is it kind of off the radar of the bikepacking community? And one, it's because there's virtually no resources for it out there, for riding, for bikepacking on it. And two, for the people that are aware of it, it just has a very well-placed reputation of being incredibly difficult. Like it's, as a whole, it's way harder than where pretty much anybody bikepacks at all these days. And so that's enough of a deterrent that most folks don't go out on it. And there are short sections, like northern New Mexico's got a 90-mile section that's phenomenally rideable. It's a really good section of trail, very quiet, like not many hikers on it, not many equestrians, and not many mountain bikers, but it's probably one of the most popular sections other than the CDT bits, the Colorado Trail bits for bikepackers to ride. So there's sections that see use, but not many. And so one of the things that I was thinking about is like, well, yeah, what about some resources for the trail with bikepackers in mind, like resources geared toward bikepackers? And the whole trail, like I honestly don't think it's worth putting time into developing resources for the whole thing because so few people are ever going to ride it. And it's something that you can, like, if you have the confidence and desire to ride something like that, clearly you have a lot of experience bikepacking and in the backcountry and can piece together if there's resources for certain sections and there's the app. Like there's enough for people to get out and ride it if they want to. What I really like the idea of is kind of like, what are the highlights of the CDT? Like, what are the best 3 or 4 or 5 day sections to ride? And those are the places that the masses, but when I say the masses, it's like the people that like bikepacking on challenging backcountry single track, not the bulk of the bikepacking community, but more people than bikepack on those sections today. Those are the sections that it would be great to have some resources for. And it was actually really kind of fortuitous that the Continental Divide Trail Coalition, that's the nonprofit behind the trail, somebody there reached out to me when they heard I was going to ride the trail and asked if I was interested in working together to put together some resources for some like highlight sections. And that project got derailed by some concerns about what is the impact that increases in mountain bike use on the trail would have on hikers, because the trail, it's a congressionally designated national scenic trail, which means there was an act that went through Congress, and the language in there specifically says for equestrians and hikers. That's what the trail is for. And that was 1978. So it's not like mountain bikers were much of a user group at that point. But that organization is there 100% to support hikers and equestrians on the trail, not bikes. And because the trail is not yet complete, they can't justify putting any time or money into the trail for bikes, which is understandable. And so what ended up happening was I did a kind of working in consultation with them, put together a kind of extensive survey or assessment form that I was filling out for kind of each section of trail about, what are the speeds of bikes on this trail, which are slow, like 95% of the time, like barely faster than hiking speed. And, what are sight lines like? How is the trail signed for bike access today? What's the sustainability of the trail itself? Like how would it hold up to increased bike use, which interestingly is also the same as horse use. Like if a trail is not sustainable for bikes, it's not sustainable for equestrians either, in terms of how it's going to hold up over time. So lots of things like that. And those are all data that can be used in decision making around like access on sections or on what sections can we reasonably send people toward to ride more, and what sections would it be potentially detrimental to the trail or to the user experience. And the reality is most of the trail actually has remarkably good sight lines, in part because your average riding speed is, like running speed. So if you can see 15 feet ahead on the trail, if you're going running speed, it's great sight line overall. And it was actually really interesting to see that some of the places with the worst sight lines, the most trail degradation and the most likelihood for user conflict all was in Colorado. Super popular sections of trail around like Breckenridge and things like that are overgrown. You can carry speed and there's tons of hikers on the trail. just recipe for bad experiences for everyone. So there's definitely places that are more suitable and less suitable for that. And some of the most popular places are some for bike packing right now are some of the least suitable in terms of what impact we might have on other users. So that was really interesting to see. But yeah, so my goal, what's that?
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say my goal is to work on some kind of highlight sections with Bikepacking Roots for, what are the two best places in Montana to go do a 3 or 4 or 5 day ride. And a lot of them you can loop on the Great Divide mountain bike route, so you don't even have to do them as point to point rides, which are always, logistically more challenging. So that's the hope. Got a bunch of other projects I need to work through first, but
yeah. Was that your goal going into the CDT? Did you approach it thinking, oh, it would be cool to open up the whole trail to somebody, and then through your process realize, okay, this is more logistically or more physically demanding, and maybe we need to do highlighted sections? Or were you aware of that going into it and approached it?
From talking with Scott Nestor about it, it was pretty clear that coming up with an official CDT, or I should say an unofficial CDT bikepacking route, like it would be awesome on paper and a few people would be really stoked about it. And it's not worth the time investment for creating something like that, since so few people would benefit from it. But highlighting the really good sections, that's where the much more helpful impact is going to be. And like it would be great to put together. And this is what Scott did. He just has literally a GPS track he'll share with you of like, here's what I think the best way to ride it is with the detours around the wilderness areas. Have at it, modifying it however you see fit. And I'll probably do something like that too. But it's like the cliff that I went up in the getting around the Bob Marshall, like, I mean, there is a trail on maps, but it's not where I'm going to send people. Like that's not something I would recommend for anyone. And there's access issues considering like it's kind of like an abandoned trail at this point. And so we're better off making sure if we're going to send people onto things that it's actually like legit trail on the ground, legit access, all of that.
Right. Yeah. One of my patrons asked a question that I thought was good, and I think you've kind of answered it. But to just kind of tie a bow on it, his question was essentially, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And like, where does this trail land in the just because you can doesn't mean you should spectrum? Like, who are the people that are going to want to take on the CDT, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad that I did it. I knew it was going to be ridiculously difficult. That's what it was. That was the kind of experience I was looking for, along with, traversing the whole spine of the Rockies through the country. I think it's a really personal thing. Like folks that want that sort of really raw backcountry experience that goes on for days and days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks and months, it's for them. There aren't that many people in the bikepacking community that want that sort of thing. And I think one of the interesting questions I got afterward was like, how much of it was type 2 fun versus type 1 fun?
Yeah.
And it's all based on outlook and perspective and expectations and everything like that. And I mean, I would say like 98% of it was type 1 fun for me. Like, it still was ridiculously hard, but I still was able to enjoy it in the moment. And I think that's the kind of thing that most folks need to be able to go out and ride something like that day in and day out for 3 months or 4 months or however long it's going to take, is that ability to find enjoyment even when it's really difficult. And it's just not the kind of enjoyment that most people find in bikepacking. So I don't think it's ever going to be super popular because of that. And it doesn't matter how much trail work gets done. Like, it's always going to be physically really difficult, technically really difficult. And, not a lot of resupplies along the way. So just everything is kind of stacked against somebody riding it and feeling like, oh, it's a great kind of bikepacking vacation. Like, no, you're working for it every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good disclaimer, and I appreciate your honesty. But I don't think that you're in the business of sending people out into the wilderness with false expectations. So you used to lead, if people listen to the first episode, lead students out on geological bikepacking trips, and and through bikepacking routes and stuff. I know sending people out into the wilderness to recreate responsibly, it has to be a top priority. So for you on the CDT, did you have fun? Did you?
I had a great time. There were definitely days that I struggled a little bit to find as much enjoyment. In Montana, some of the deadfall is, I mean, when you've got 5 miles with, I don't know, 30 trees down, or 30 like piles of trees every mile.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to enjoy that. Those were legitimately, like, I think the most dangerous times on the trail is like scrambling over deadfall with a heavy bike and tired legs and branches that are broken off by hikers to make it easier. And so they're, standing up like sharp spears, and you're having to get through those and just getting progressively more tired. Like, that's tedious and sketchy. And like, that was hard to find enjoyment in. Unfortunately, that wasn't every day. That was, sections every few days for the most part. The bugs in Montana were horrendous at times, like in the Beaverhead Mountains. It was the worst mosquitoes I've ever seen in the lower 48, and black flies and horse flies all together, and was so hard to tolerate at times, especially when it was really hot and I was just completely worked. So and I didn't have a tent to sleep in at night. I just had a tarp and a head net. So when they didn't subside at night and were still bothering you all night long, that was really draining mentally.
Yeah. My daughter's singing Taylor Swift at the top of her lungs. I don't know if you can hear, but
I can't hear that.
You can or cannot?
No, I can't.
Okay. For anyone listening on the podcast, I apologize, but I'm a single dad. This is the life we live. Were there any times where it is interesting. I assumed that you were approaching this, and again, it was just an assumption. I assumed you were approaching this really as a way to develop it, knowing, your role at Bikepack Roots, and you have a history of developing and bringing routes to market, so to speak. So I thought that was your motivation. And so I'm like, thinking, okay, Kurt, he has to climb that cliff because he has to know what it's like. And he can't take the dirt. He's got to climb over the trees. So you were making a lot of those choices just personally. You were like, okay, well, this is the line and I'm going to just do it. Was there ever a time where you didn't follow the line?
Yeah, I'm really stubborn when it comes to that. Like, even if I'm the one that made the line, like on those wilderness bypasses at times, like, yeah, there were dirt roads I could have taken, but like, I really wanted to know what the trail was like. And it, there it wasn't even CDT. It was just like some old backcountry trail on Forest Service land that, I don't know anything about. No one knows or cares that I'm out on it. Or if I take a dirt road, like, no one will ever even notice if I hop on the dirt road. It's not for anyone else. It's just this in the back of my head, like, I need to know what that's like. And I get super excited about linking lines together, little dashed lines or dotted lines on maps, and get strangely compelled to actually follow through on the ground, which I think sometimes is great to have that stubbornness, and sometimes is ridiculously questionable with making choices around that. But it was all, with a trip like that, it needs to be a selfish pursuit with how hard it is. Like, you need to want to do it for yourself.
Yeah.
On the CDT sections, like, I really did want to ride as much of the bike legal CDT as I reasonably could along the way. And there were times where, like in southern Colorado, when I was riding through the San Juans, and that's a pretty long section between resupplies, like I think five days or so between, what would it be? For folks that know, it's like the Buena Vista area on the CDT all the way. Well, I guess I was able to resupply at Monarch Pass. So Monarch Pass to Creed, which is riding CDT or Colorado Trail to Silverton, but not dropping into town, and then doubling back, going like way back to the east to Creed. So that was like 5 days. And Scott Morris was actually going to come out and meet me for a couple of days of riding there, which was awesome. And the day before I met him, the way I was able to convince him to come out was like, hey, Scott, there's a section of Colorado Trail and CDT that I don't think you've ever ridden. And it was one that, for one of the wilderness bypasses, you come up a pass on a road from the north, and then you hop and ride CT or CDT to the west. But there's actually more trail to the east. And it's so circuitous in that area that it wasn't actually that far to climb back up to that pass from the other direction and then ride the trail the other way and then drop into Creed. So it was basically, I did a loop or a figure eight kind of thing way out there, and got Scott to come out and meet me. And that was like, there's no reason I had to do that. I just really wanted to see what that section of trail was like. And it turned out to be stunning. It was like a few miles of, after hike a bike to get up high, it was a few miles of riding on this flat alpine plateau at like, what were we at, 12,000 feet or something like that? And it was just like this ribbon of single track across the top. Absolutely stunning. Like some of the most mellow tundra riding of anywhere in Colorado that I've seen. And yeah, I had a blast. And so that was one of those scenarios where it's like, I'm feeling good. I have just enough food to be able to ride a little bit extra. Scott brought me a couple burritos, which helped with that. And just this curiosity to know what that bit of trail was like, and to be able to incorporate a little bit more official, quote unquote, well, officially official CDT in the ride. That was great. And so that was, that's, I don't know, that was my weird thinking along the way. No compulsion other than for knowing what it's like on my own.
Yeah. I love that, man. That's such it really, I think, probably speaks to who you are as a person. Like, who are you as a person when nobody's watching? What line do you take? And also, like, there isn't a history with this route the way there is with like the Tour Divide, where, it's like everybody knows about all the different passes, and did you take this line or did you, it's like when you're doing the CDT, you're really just like, I know you weren't the first, but you're still an early adopter, and there isn't a group of community that's going to say, oh, he didn't take that trail, he went on, like, it's completely self-directed.
That's one of the things that also bothers me about the bikepacking community in a way, is that there is this notion of like, this is the way to do it. If you're riding that route, you got to do this, like, otherwise it doesn't count. And like, I had some guy that I ran into on the trail, and a bikepacker or mountain biker, but he also bikepacks in, where was that? It was in southern Montana. And on that day, I was riding with a few friends that had would set a shuttle to ride that section of trail. And I threw like my handlebar bag and a bunch of food in their shuttle vehicle so that I didn't have to carry it for the whole day ride. And he was like joking, like, oh, you get an asterisk now because you're not doing it self-supported. It's like, what does it matter? Like, it's not up to you to like consider the way that somebody should be doing a ride. Like, you're just out there for yourself. If you're in a race, yeah, there's rules. But if you're out there on your own for your own adventure, like, make whatever decisions you want. It's your ride. Like, decide how to have the most fun with it and get the most enjoyment out of it. And like, if your goal is to ride 100% of the like Colorado Trail race route as a tour, like, cool, that's great if you want to do it that way. And if you want to take every shortcut possible to avoid the worst sections of the trail, like if you don't want to ride Sergeant's Mesa and deal with 15 miles of like ridiculously chunky trail, fine, that's great, skip it, you'll have more fun. I bet.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I had a different takeaway. My thought was, you're creating or collecting data and stuff for Bikepack Roots and for the CDT and helping, but it sounds like a big part of this was just a personal motivation to go and do it. And so my thought was like, great, that I would assume makes it more fun. Like, you're making a choice. You're not, I don't have to go over that pass because have to give data to this person. Like, it's just self-directed. You're like, what else am I going to do today? I want to put my bike on my back, take 3 trips to get to the top of this mountain and see what's on the other side. And that's what I want to do.
Exactly.
And that's what's going to make me happy.
Yeah. And when it did get hard and I started not having fun with what I was doing, I always just reminded myself, like, hey, you chose this. Like, you chose to ride the CDT. You chose that knowing how hard it was going to be full well. And then in the shorter term, like 3 hours ago, you chose to go this way. Like, you could have gone around. You knew there was going to be, just whatever the hard situation was, just reminding myself that I made that decision myself and I got to live with the consequences of it. So might as well make the best of it. Usually that helped turn my mind around pretty quickly. Yeah,
I think perspective is great. A lot of times if things get hard, it's a mental shift that I do. It's kind of a trick, but I'm like, oh, good. I've been riding my bike for 15 hours so that my knees would hurt, so that my ass would hurt, so that it's like, I earned this, this is what I came for, it's like, you knew that this was going to happen. Like, this is why you're here, so don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Just be here now, like deal with it.
Yep, exactly.
I think that's such a good perspective. And I'm going to echo it just because I think it's super valuable that I think as a community, I think we do really great, but I think we can keep doing better with allowing people to ride their damn bike any way that they see fit. And we don't need to police everybody, I mean, there's these records and these FKTs and there's routes that it's like, okay, we need rules but outside of that, we should be celebrating fun and enjoyment and racing can be fun and enjoyable too. But it's like, yeah, if Kurt wants to get a burrito from Scott and throw his gear in a truck and ride the section without gear because he's going to lift his bike over his head 1,000 times in the next mile, then great. Who cares? Like, I don't know. It's like, I agree with you. I think it's important. I like that you're saying that too, is like, prioritize fun, prioritize your personal enjoyment for the thing that you're doing. Because if we're not keeping the fun and enjoyment at the forefront of riding bikes, then what the fuck are we doing? Like we gotta keep the fun at the front, I think, so I think that's important. You talked about it earlier about the National Scenic Trail designation that the CDT has and other trails as well, and how, from, I think you said 1978, it was put in there that only equestrians and hikers this trail is set aside for equestrians and hikers. And I think this is a perfect illustration of why cycling advocacy is important. And furthermore, why Bikepacking Roots has value. And so I thought that this would be a good segue or tie-in to speaking about what Bikepacking Roots is and what the goals and objectives of that organization is for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We were founded 2017. So 6 years ago now. Kate Boyle and I were the co-founders, and I was the director for the first, I don't know what, 4 or 5 years. And the whole vision for the organization was being a very much community supported effort to support the bikepacking community. And for us, that looked like route development, really high quality routes with really good resources, so people know exactly what they're getting into in terms of what the experience is going to be, and making sure those are updated and regularly and stewarded. There's an educational arm for that, just how to help people get more into bikepacking, how to get new people into it, and how to support the community in bringing in folks that are less represented in the bikepacking community, and extend that opportunity as best we can to everyone out there that's interested in being part of it. And then an advocacy component, which is very much focused on the realities of bike access, kind of long distance bike access. So connectivity, whether or not bikes are allowed on certain trails or not in the backcountry, whether areas that are open to bikes continue to be open to bikes, things like that, and public lands related advocacy, and thinking about things from like a large landscape perspective. Like, well, it's not just that trail or that road remains open to bikes for bikepacking through this area, but that this large landscape is conserved in a way that it also supports the experience that we're looking for. And conversely, trying to use the bikepacking community as advocates to protect these places that we ride. So it goes both ways. And to help folks become advocates for those places, you need to get folks out there and help them understand just what's so special about the place, like beyond just the aesthetics of it or how quiet it is or things like that. But kind of share what's at stake if those sorts of areas aren't protected. So that's something that we've been working hard to do and gradually grow our capacity. Like, we're still organizationally very small. We've got Noelle Battle, who is our ED. She's our first full-time ED, and she's amazing. She lives in Baltimore, Maryland, and has been with us for about 6 months now. And then I'm the routes director currently and focused mostly on route development. And Kate Boyle is involved in the education side of things and events. And we've also got Jan Bennett, who lives in central New Mexico, northern New Mexico, who's been a longtime volunteer and regional advisor and is working with us on a variety of capacities at this point. So that's basically it for staff. Three of us are very part-time, one full-time person. We've got, I think we're up to close to 9,000 members. So,
Oh, wow.
With the organization, so huge level of community support. We've got a board of directors, which is engaged in a whole variety of ways, very much behind the scenes, which is how it is at most nonprofits. And they're the ones that just focus on making sure that we're continuing to pursue our mission and that we don't get sidetracked on other things or get too focused on one side and not doing enough with something else. And so, gradually continuing to work on building that capacity we have. And this year we rolled out our community routes project, which was since the day we launched, people have been asking, how can we submit how can I submit a route to Bikepack Roots? And we just haven't had the capacity up until this year to really put the structure in place to do that in a way that all the routes are carefully vetted. They're from folks that we know and trust, that they're putting together a really good route and that the experience and how that's conveyed to the riders is going to really make sure people get out there and have a good experience, or as good of an experience as possible. And that each route has a steward that is on the ground and making sure that route is, and the resources are up to date every year. And not just something that gets submitted and then kind of 5 years later, sections are closed to bikes or things have changed on the ground and nothing gets updated with the resources. So that's what we're trying to really avoid. And got a community stewards program, which is helping support folks that are very dedicated to helping grow our sport. And so these are people all over the country that are just kind of doing their thing already and that we want to be able to support. And so that's a new program that we just launched a few months ago. And we're continuing to grow our campouts program, which are on the ground events that are just very community oriented, very much non-competitive, just built around helping educate and bring people together to have positive bikepacking experiences. So those are all things that we've been working with. Noelle has been basically leading the charge in expanding those and getting those off the ground, since we'd been talking about them for years and just never quite committed to actually making them happen because we didn't quite have the capacity. And now we do. And she's bringing those all into reality.
Yeah, I'm excited to have Noelle on board. She and I have had some emails, and we've hopped on one Zoom chat so far. But I'm excited. I don't know if she's copied you in on any of this stuff, but Bikes for Death and Bikepacking Roots are gonna work on partnering up a little bit more going into 2024, helping to promote what you guys are doing. And I'm a big fan of what y'all are doing. I don't know if fan is the right word, but I'm an appreciative community member who thinks that y'all are providing value, and routes are great, and creating diversity in the community is great, and helping to bring other people in that way. But for me, like the key thing is having an organization that represents bikepackers and cyclists. And so we have a seat at the table, in these conversations, and having that land access is so critical. And I really appreciate what you said about how, in order to advocate for those places and in order to be good stewards of them, we have to get people out there and experiencing and having these wilderness experiences, because it is through those experiences that we're going to get a personal relationship with wild places, and therefore a personal desire and motivation to help protect them and to advocate for them. And these are some of the biggest topics I think that we can talk about as outdoors people, is how do we protect our wild places? How do we be good stewards of them? And how do we make sure that we continue to have access to them? Because there's fucking companies out there that would love to put a pipeline in through, or, there's all kinds of threats to our access that we need to be we can't just sit back and hope that they're just always going to be there. I mean,
Yep.
We have a history of people fighting for those the rights and the access to these lands, and so I feel like I'm over hitting this note here, but I do think it is very important. And I'm wondering now, do you have any asks for the community? How can the community, like I said, Bikes for Death is going to make a greater effort at going forward to support what Bikepacking Roots is doing, because I believe in it. I think it's important. What's the ask, if anything, from the community right now? How can they help support Bikepacking Roots?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably in this conversation two things that I would say. One is become a member. And support us. And, you can donate $1, you can donate $100, like whatever you want. Any amount helps. But that is crucial as a community supported organization. Like we need financial support from members, and especially to grow our advocacy program, which is one of our goals, is to expand that so that we can be more engaged and more involved in more places in those advocacy issues. And then two, pay attention to our communications. And if you're a member, you get our newsletter. But follow us on Instagram and pay attention to what we're talking about, because when it comes to advocacy, so much of our asks for the community are simply, can you comment on this issue as it's happening? And that's how land management decisions in part are made, is by listening to what the community says during the public comment process. And we don't put out too many asks. We try to keep them very targeted for important ones where we really want people to engage. And those are times when your voice is going to be important. And so I think, and one that we're working on, and it's been really great to see in the last, I guess, year and a half, 2 years, we've started working much more closely with a couple other advocacy organizations, International Mountain Bike Association, IMBA, and Adventure Cycling Association, ACA, and People for Bikes, also in a few different areas, that working together as basically the organizations representing the cycling community in these spaces. Together we can have a much more prominent voice, and if we can work together to actually come up with strategies for the best way to respond to certain things, that makes it all that much more powerful. And so I think we had one ask for the community. It's probably about a year ago, for the BOLT Act, which is the Biking on Long Distance Trails Act, which has been slowly making its way through committee and through Congress, that would direct land managers to identify and work toward either finishing or starting a number of, I think it's a total of 20 long distance bike trails on public lands. And this is huge. Like, there's never been a directive working its way through Congress like that. It's quite non-controversial, but still taking its time to get through Congress, as things do. And with our ask, I think it was us and ACA had a campaign to generate letters of support. And I think we had like 7,000 letters of support that came out of that. So that was phenomenal.
Yeah,
that's the kind of support we need in those sorts of things, to make those happen. And also, when was it? It was just like maybe 6 weeks ago, Noel was in Washington along with folks from a few of those other organizations. Gabe Tiller, one of our former board members, and he's at the helm of the Orogenesis project, the big single track route down the West Coast, and a few other cycling advocates were all in Washington specifically to meet with folks about those projects, those potential trails, BOLT Act, and just generate more support with the representatives in Congress. So those are really important things. It's not the sexiest work to be doing. It's not the most fun work to be doing, but it can make a huge difference for the community as a whole. And so those sorts of things, if we put out an ask for folks to comment on things, that means that it's one that we think is actually critically important to get folks engaged with. So follow along. And when those times come up, it can take, I would say on average, probably will take you 5 minutes to do something like that, to write a very short letter of support.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great sales pitch. I'm sold. I'm advocated. I'm mobilized.
Yes.
No, but yeah, that it is maybe not the most sexy thing to talk about, but I know we talked about it on the first episode, and I'll probably talk about it every single time that you and I talk, because I recognize and I believe that it is vitally important. We have to have a seat at the table, and we need groups like yours and ACA and People for Bikes and everything who are advocating for us. So appreciate the work that you guys do over there. It's critical. And the one thing I've noticed about this community is it seems like this is a very engaged community and a mobilized community, where I mean, to have 9,000 members and get 7,000 little letters written, I mean, that sounds pretty good. And I do think that this community is somewhat in tune to the fact that we're still in its infancy, you know, especially like the bikepacking side is what I'm referring to, not cycling, but the bikepacking side of it is still in its infancy. And it's a community effort to keep this thing going, you know. I mean, it's
but when we're now, we being Bikepack Roots, when we're getting invited to have a seat at the table in cases, that's a sign that things are moving in a really positive direction, that bikepackers are being recognized by other organizations and by land managers in some cases as being a legitimate user group that needs to have a voice, or whose voice needs to be considered. That's fantastic. Like, that's the direction that we want to be heading in, and that's what's happening.
Yeah. You want to get invited to those black tie dinners and have cocktail parties on Washington.
Oh my gosh.
That premonition is going to come true. Just wait. You're going to be at one day.
I'm not going to argue with that. You are correct.
All right. So let's maybe sell some training plans real quick. I'm going to use this as a selfish opportunity, but we can both benefit here, Kurt. Where are you at right now? Are you open to taking on more athletes? Because let's make this clear. I think you do two things. One, I think you sell training plans, and two, you do individual one-on-one coaching. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. I'm not taking on any additional athletes right now. My roster is packed for the next 5 months or so with folks that have kind of winter and spring goals that they're working toward. But the alternative that I have is I have two different kind of bikepacking race specific training plans. One is a 4-month long plan, one's a 6-month long plan, and they're basically just designed for quote unquote short bikepacking races and long bikepacking races. So whether or not you're looking at a 2 to 4 day race versus something that's like 6 or 7 plus days. And I've had plenty of folks train for Tour Divide on the 4-month plan, and people use the 6-month plan for like the Arizona Trail 300, where they finish in 3 days. So it's not cut and dry which one's right for you. And so, so I've got those, and those have been incredibly popular. They come with it's like a 60-page kind of preparation guide that runs through all different kinds of considerations that aren't necessarily race specific considerations, things like sports nutrition and fueling, things like mental preparation strategies for doing hard things. And so I've had actually quite a few people that have bought the plans just to get the guidebook for getting ready for big bikepacking trips and learn more about what they can do, not to train, but to just kind of get ready for hard things like that. Yeah. So
I'm taking on I'm doing ITT of the AZT 300 in April of next year. So I was actually doing the math yesterday, and I was like, I was talking to my 6-year-old daughter. We were on a bike ride, and she was asking me questions. We were actually podcasting. I was practicing. I got a new microphone, so we were practicing, and then she started asking me questions, and she was like, when are you doing that hard ride? And I was like, oh shit, that's 6 months away. I need to start training. Like, this is the time. So I was going to try to hire you, but you're not taking on new athletes. So, do you think I should pick up which packet do you think I should pick up?
I would push you to the 4-month one. I think for most folks, 4 months of fairly dedicated training is ideal. I think more than that is a long time to sustain, to be focused on training and following structure for a lot of folks. And it gets hard to keep having fun with it, since, I mean, the reality is for most of us endurance riders, the reason we ride our bike is because we love riding our bikes. It's not necessarily because we love training to ride our bikes. And so there's that fun component that is critical to factor in. And I'd rather see people spend a couple months doing like quote unquote base training that isn't actually structured, just riding your bike a bunch and having fun, and then start following that 4-month plan for 4 months or even just for 3 months to get ready for one of those events. So I really only push people that are racing something like Tour Divide or that scale toward the 6-month plan.
Okay. Now, for someone like me, I run my own business. I'm a single dad with 2 daughters. I'm busy on top of busy. I feel like, and my life is always chaotic. And I'm asking this personally, but I'm hoping other people can benefit too from this information. Like how well does your 4-month program, how adaptable is it for someone like me, who isn't a full-time racer and, I've got a job and kids and all that, like how well will it work for somebody like me?
You're the kind of person it's designed for. Like, I don't write plans for pro athletes that have all the time in the world, in theory, to train, which actually isn't the case. But
right. But in theory, And the so outside perspective is like, oh, all they do is ride their bike. Yeah.
Yep. It's very understandable, but that's so far from reality.
Exactly.
But so the plan, each of those training plans actually has 2 plans within it, like 2 levels. There's a lower volume and a higher level plan within the training plan. So you get both of them, and they're all laid out kind of so you can see like, what does the higher volume plan and more demanding plan do this week? What's the other one do this week? And you can almost like pick and choose. I've had people follow the lower level for one race and then the higher level one for the next race that they do.
Okay.
I've had people pick and choose, like just kind of use it as a recipe book to choose workouts, or like, oh, this one, I'm a little tired right now. What would the lower volume one ask me to do? So you can kind of, and it's not like days translate directly from one to the other, but you can get a really good idea looking at like, oh, what's the more demanding approach? What's the less demanding approach? Yeah. And the reality also is, if somebody is training for something and they follow, say, 70% of that plan and don't have time to complete like 30% of the rides, that's great. Like, that's going to help you out so much more than not following a plan at all. And so some folks get really caught up in like, what if I miss a workout? And I hate that term because it's, everything you're doing is fantastic if you're actually following a structured plan. Fantastic compared to just going out and riding your bike every day and not thinking about it. So do the best you can with it, and you will see considerable gains no matter what you do. To a point, if you do too much, you actually will hurt yourself, and that won't be beneficial. And if you try to cram too much into life, I mean, when you think about overtraining is stressing your body too much, like to be beyond what it is ready for, or what it can adapt to. And that can be training stress, but it can be any kind of life stress, whether it's like work stress or relationship stress or not sleeping enough stress. Like, all of those add to that. And so just packing more training into an already busy life can increase stress fairly dramatically. And so that's something you want to avoid and really be cognizant of, that you can get overtrained on relatively low training volume if the rest of your life is high stress. So that's something to keep in mind with not trying to do too much and pack too much in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's opportunity cost for everything. A long training ride might take you away from your kids, or if you're in a relationship, away from the person you're in a relationship with, it could cause strain. It's like, hey, I never see you anymore. I mean, there's all kinds of factors, where you're trying to balance it. And it's not just riding bikes, man. It's figuring out how to make money and keep your relationships and stay healthy and mentally well, and also do all these.
If you're healthy, mentally in a good place, and having fun with the training, and show up to an ultra like that, that's fantastic. If any one of those things is starting to struggle, or you're starting to struggle with any one of those things, and you show up to a race, you're likely to not perform as well and not enjoy it as much as if you had trained less, and in an effort to make sure you're having fun, make sure that the balance in life was healthy, all of that. So I'm very much an advocate for, make sure you're having fun with it. Don't, like, as soon as things stop being fun, step back and really think about, like, okay, what can I change to start having fun with this again? Because that needs to be the goal, and you're going to race so much better if you're really happy and having fun with it. It doesn't matter, like, if you're as fit as you possibly can be, if you're the fittest person doing these races, but if you show up kind of drained from that, mentally, then you're probably not going to have a great ride. And
Yeah.
there are literally people who have shown up for Tour Divide and not started the race because they realized how burned out they were from the training to get to the race and feel like they were ready for it. So like that's the end member case of what could potentially happen. But yeah, have fun with it. Prioritize that.
Yeah. Great advice. Just anecdotally from doing this podcast for 5 years, when I'm interviewing people that are winning races or doing very well, they're happy. I rarely talk to somebody who's like, "Oh, I had a terrible time." I mean, they're like having fun. They've found a way to really be happy in those hard moments and find joy. And I have found that it's I don't know to what degree, I don't know how to put a percentage on it, but your mental well-being has a huge impact on your ability to perform well and endure things for a long time. If you're not mentally well, you're going to crack so much faster and easier. And so again, let's prioritize fun. It really does come back to being, having a good time and being happy and being enjoyable. Those miles are going to be a little bit easier with a smile on your face,
They most definitely are.
Yeah. I've never followed a training plan, man. I've never, ever followed a training plan. But I've had, I just tried it was my own route in Central Texas, a 475 mile route. And I only made it 200 miles before I had to DNF. I've already enumerated that for my listeners, so I won't bore you with the details, but I saw my notes from our first interview. So I reviewed my notes, and I don't think it came up on the episode. I don't think, but in 2019, I had on my notes to ask you, give me some tips for the AZT 300. Like the AZT 300 has been a bucket list for me for 5 years now. And it's a date on the calendar is happening this year, and I want to be successful and I want to have fun. Like I want to go out there and enjoy the experience, and so I'm going to train, man. I'm going to buy I'm going to buy it. And what we should do is maybe do another episode next year and I can tell you how my AZT went, and we can talk about your training plan a little bit more in depth, because that's another reason I want to do it. It's like, okay, well, I've had all these experiences of just going and riding my bike a lot and training in the gym and trying to be healthy, but not with really any direction. Yeah. So now I want the experience of, okay, I'm going to follow a plan as close as I can, and then and see what the difference is. I'm curious.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really excited to hear how that feels.
Me too.
But yeah, the AZT 300 is phenomenal. I think I've raced that 9 times. It's kind of the local route. It was a really fun one to do all sorts of experiments on and just try this, try that, especially once it became super familiar. So that one's near and dear to my heart, and April is the ideal time to race that one. So that's
why ITT is awesome. You get to pick your month.
Yep, exactly. And you can hopefully have the flexibility to pick a good weather window, because in April it can be, twice I raced over Mount Lemmon literally in blizzards in that race, which was not what I had bargained for. And then we've also had 100+ degrees in it in other years. And one of those years I think had 90 some degrees and a blizzard, which was a harsh combination to deal with.
Now that sounds like the Arizona Trail. Yeah, and Tour Divide, the weather windows and the fluctuation and the weather that you're going to hit is just widely ranging, which is part of the adventure, man. You just so to answer your question, no, we have a date. It's April 11th. We're actually inviting, it's going to be a group start, like an unofficial group start. Cool. I'm just inviting people. You can go do your ITT at the same time if you want to. It's not organized, but if you want to show up, we can ride it together. So it's in that way, it's going to be very much I'm picking the right month. But I'm going to be subject to, if it's hot, it's hot. If it's cold, it's cold. And I'm going to have to go ride it no matter what. So it's going to be what it's going to be. But I'm really excited to finally get out there, and I'll follow up with you and tell you how it goes. Yeah, please do. All right. This has been fun, man. I've enjoyed chatting with you. It's always a pleasure. Let's not wait another 4 years. No. And I think it sounds like April of next year. That'll be the next one. Sounds good. That's not that far away. I wanted to direct people to the Radavis to, if they want to get more granular with your CDT experience. You released, was it a 4-part written with photos and stuff on the Radavis?
Yeah, so I did a series for them. There's one that was kind of like a pre-trip article. It was kind of background to the CDT and to biking on it, and then three from during the trip, and the last of those, the kind of Colorado, New Mexico article, just popped up there on Friday. So there's links. I think that last one has links to the prior ones. Each one has a photo gallery of like 25 or 30 photos to just really kind of help show people, because you can talk about it, but you can't.
Yeah.
You can't put it into. I can't put it into words. Just how amazing it is and just how diverse it is out there. So the photos tell more of that story, and then there will be a couple upcoming pieces that are. Well, I got kind of so many questions while I was out there about various considerations for the gear, how things were working, or why did you bring a tarp and not a tent? Hikers were blown away that I did not have a tent. Every hiker had a tent. And a lot of questions from folks about food and like, how did I carry food for 5+ days in between resupplies, especially on a full suspension setup without big bags. So a lot of questions about that. So I'm going to do 2 Q&A articles. That are, one's focused kind of on gear and bike setup and all that, and then the other one is mostly focused on food and food planning. Now it'll tie in a little bit of stuff from the Iditarod Trail earlier this year, when I had to carry like a week's worth of food, and I mean on that one you're carrying like 7,000 calories a day almost. So much food, so many considerations when it goes into the fuel side of things. So if you do have questions,
not as much as the 14,000 you carried on the Colorado Trail race, I remember that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
14,000, I believe, was the number that you had to carry. That's just for like a day and a half
or something.
Yeah. It was gnarly, man. And I remember it was, you averaged 350 calories per hour. That's what your body can tolerate. At least it did at that time.
Yep. That's for racing. That's my goal. For touring, it's a little bit less than that. But yeah, all sorts of factors. So if you do have any questions, I haven't written those articles yet, and the way I was soliciting questions was either you can leave a comment on that last Radavist article with a question in there, or on my Instagram, the last couple posts are Q&A type. Just like, give me a question, I'll answer it in the artitle if I don't answer it here. So if you do
perfect. Yeah, that'll be awesome. Yeah, people need to go check out that Radavist article and send you questions if they have them. This is professional curiosity. What camera were you using? Because the photos were actually.
That's
amazing.
A question I've gotten a lot. Thank you. It's a Sony Alpha 6300, so kind of medium size camera body, and then a fairly hefty Tamron. What is it? A 28-200.
Oh, I have this 28-200 too.
Yeah,
I have an A7 III, so I'm still in the bigger Sony family. Yeah, but I'm looking. I think I'm going to do what is it called? I can't remember, the A7 or something. It's a smaller mirrorless one. I can't remember, but I think I'm looking for something more compact. I was like, I bet Kurt has a more compact one. But
I've just gradually graduated from the 6,000 to the 61 to the 63 as I've broken camera bodies over the years, and each time I can't quite commit to anything too much bigger. And the 6300 I've been carrying it on most of my trips for like 4 years now, and I'm shocked that it still works. Like, it's so worn, abraded around the edges and everything. I go through lenses, but that body has been impressively resilient. And the Tamron lens is a fantastic. Like, I debated, do I just bring one? Do I bring 2 lenses? And I was like, I can't bring more than one.
Yeah.
And every time on the trail, if I ran into hikers, it was like, hey, can I take a picture of you? And I pull out my camera, and they're all like, whoa, you brought a real camera. And because none of them had cameras. They just all had their phones. And I didn't actually weigh the camera until I finished the ride, but the camera and lens are 2 pounds. So it is a hefty thing to carry for the whole time, but I'm really glad that
it's worth it. I think so. I really value the photos from trips, for me personally, like reliving them and stuff. And so like, it's a weight penalty that I'm happy to take. I won't take it on the AZT. It depends on what racing, I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm not even, I don't even know if I'm racing, but I'm just, that's going to be me against a trail. That's not for creating, photos. I got my iPhone, but, I when I can, I definitely like to take photos. Cool, man. Well, I'll let you get back to the rest of your day. I don't know what you got going on, but I bet it's a lot more exciting than talking on the internet.
I don't even... I don't even know what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. So I'm in one of those like so busy during the week that on the weekends I'm like, wow, I haven't even had time to think about the weekend yet. I'll
I
go
know
ride my
that
bike.
life.
So I think
Yeah.
I'll go ride my bike.
Dude, that's my life is like I'll just find myself in a moment of not needing to do anything. I'm like, oh, I kind of have downtime. What am I gonna do? I'll go ride my bike. That's usually the answer. But yeah, I mean, it's like
Yep.
I don't have time to think ahead. It's like I don't know. We'll let the
Yep.
future worry about itself.
Yep.
Good
That's where
chats,
I'm at
man.
right now.
I enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
on, man. We'll talk to you again sooner rather than later.
Yep. All right. Have a great one.
All right, take care, buddy. Bye bye. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. It was a pleasure to have Kurt back on the podcast, and it's great to have him as a member of Team Bicycle. Now, I'm going to make this short and sweet because the same kiddo that made an introduction in today's episode is in the next room, and she's got a tummy bug, so I got to go take care of her. But next week's episode is TBD. We have a couple potentials, so I don't know exactly which one's gonna be first, but we got a couple good ones coming up next. Actually, while we're here, let me go ahead and announce one of the possible next episodes. Next week, November 15th, Hannah Simon and I are going to be recording our final installment of Hannah Simon taking on the Triple Crown this year. Spoiler alert, she completed it. All 3 races, Tour Divide, Colorado Trail, Arizona Trail Race, complete rookie to all those events. Well done, Hannah. We are, absolutely blown away with your accomplishment. So we're going to be chatting next Wednesday, November 15th at 6:30 p.m. We're going to be at Cycle East in Austin. We're going to have a live audience. You can come, you can watch and listen to the podcast. And then, of course, we're going to have a question and answer session right afterwards. So please, if you're in the Austin area or if you want to make a flight, you want to be at a live event and hear the finale of Hannah Simon's Triple Crown, you don't want to miss it. And if you do miss it, I'll release it as an episode on the podcast, so you won't completely miss out. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Until next week, you know what to do. Go ride your damn bike.